This is a Global Skills Podcast, conversations that shape the future of work and learning. We're exploring how we close the skills gap and build a future where everyone has the chance to thrive. From education to business, connecting people, ideas, and opportunities that drive change. It's about collaboration, curiosity, and creating real impact today. Because every skill learned brings us one step closer to a more inclusive world. The Global Skills Podcast, where learning and opportunity come together. Today on the Global Skills Podcast, I'm joined by Ben Sewell, currently a talent acquisition manager at Instant Impact, and someone who has spent years recruiting, leading, and building teams in one of the most people-dependent industries there is, hospitality. Drawing on real hands-on experience from the front line of talent and leadership, Ben shares honest insights into transferable skills, retention challenges, apprenticeships, and why hospitality might be one of the most overlooked talent pipelines in the economy. This is a grounded, no-fluff conversation about skills, people, and what really needs to change. Ben, it's really good to have you on the Global Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invite.
So I'm really interested to speak with you because I know not only have you led TA teams, but you've also been really hands-on and you've really had your finger on the pulse in terms of the shifts and changes in TA, especially more recently in hospitality. But before we jump into that, just tell me a bit about yourself and how you ended up where you are today in the role that you are.
Yeah, thank you. I think same as probably 99% of recruiters, I fell into it. It wasn't a career I ever thought I would pursue. It's not one that I really knew too much about either, to be honest with you. I've been sort of previously in sales roles and sort of customer service roles, and it seemed like the sort of natural next step. So I kind of went into it a little bit blinded, and I've really enjoyed it. Started an agency, I then moved in house, and 10 years now, and still here, still enjoying it. And yeah, here I am, I think, is the the simple way of explaining me, really.
And what has the hospitality industry been like in these last few years to recruit for? We recently had actually a guest who's working for a five-star hotel, and they gave a very good understanding of what's happening. But I'd be very keen to hear the level that you were recruiting for, the types of hospitality, and really the focus, is it still on what experience you have, or can you see a shift towards skills first hiring?
Yeah, so I guess I've been in a slightly unique position, I think, within hospitality, because I've been very fortunate enough to, I guess, cover a lot of the different areas within hospitality. So the more casual dining side and the more premium side, as well as the sort of experiential side now as well. So I've been very fortunate enough to kind of cover all three. So it gives me what I like to think is a more sort of rounded knowledge and understanding of the industry as a whole. And I think the biggest challenges we do have generally is the back of house, is the kitchen teams. That's the hardest part of the attraction and retention side. But I think from a skills perspective, generally, and more of the industry, we're quite a well linked network within our industry. There's lots of TA leaders and people actually kind of on the ground doing the grunt work, so to speak, that are very collaborative. So we all sort of share our ideas. We all have a few drinks after work one Thursday evening up in London, and we all put the world to rights about what's going on and things. But I think everybody is tending to lean towards that more sort of skills based side of things. But the issues we have is, I think it's kind of widely publicized everywhere, is a lot of it is around the budget side of things. Lots of, not just in hospitality, but across the board, lots of industries are sort of cutting their TA teams at the moment. Their operating teams are kind of running on bare bones, and hospitality seems to bear the brunt of that a lot. So I think
Okay.
as much as people want to go to that sort of skills based side of things, they don't necessarily have the budget all the time to allow someone who's, for example, in a restaurant, not necessarily worked in a restaurant before, but they've worked in a retail like Tesco or something like that, for example, where all the skill sets there. You can run a P&L, you can run a team, you can manage everything, various departments all at once on a huge scale comparatively to a restaurant. So you know that they can do the job, but do you have the time to train them in that slightly different way of working? Can we afford the extra 2-3 months of potential, not necessarily hand holding, but a little bit of extra training to make sure Mr. X, Mrs. Y can do the job? I think that's where we sort of face those barriers a little bit more.
It's really interesting. And I think it's always hard when you're maybe on the agency side and you're advising the companies what to do. Whereas when you're in house, maybe you have a little bit more influence. I don't know. But we were touching on before this idea of if you're bringing in transferable skills or early talent, It feels like a more of an apprenticeship model would really help employers if it was plugging that skills gap. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think apprenticeships I'm a huge fan of. I think it's absolutely fantastic, especially from not just an attraction piece, but the retention piece, which for me within hospitality, I think that's the hardest kind of aspect of it. It's not the attraction, it is the retention of your top talent. And I think getting people into an industry that traditionally it's, oh, you don't want to work in hospitality because it's really long hours, it's late hours, it's unsociable. Yeah, sometimes there can be. There's no getting around that. If you're going out as dinner on a Friday or Saturday evening, yeah, you're not necessarily going to be going out at 4 o'clock till 7. You might be going out at 7, 8 o'clock. So yes, there's arguably a little bit, later hours and things. But if you have an apprenticeship, it gets people in, and the teams are fantastic. I can honestly hand on heart say I've never worked in a really bad team within a restaurant or anywhere I've worked, kind of thing. Hospitality is a unique industry. Everyone, no matter how many people you're short staffed on a Friday night, Saturday night, everyone bands together. You get the job done. You do the best you can, and everyone looks after each other. But I think the apprenticeship side, we've been quite fortunate in a few organisations that I've worked with where the apprenticeship schemes have been really, really important, especially nowadays with the sort of skill shortage with chefs and the back of house teams generally. Apprenticeships is a fantastic way to teach these brilliant skills, as well as doing your maths, your English, if you've not quite got that when you've left school and things. But you don't want to traditionally go into university or college or whatever. You actually want to go into the workplace. It's a perfect step in your career, really, from that side.
I think sometimes people look at hospitality and they don't necessarily think career. They see it as maybe a stopgap while you're in university, or you do it for a few years while
Yeah.
you're finding your feet. Like, have you seen people start and actually make careers within hospitality?
Joe, absolutely. And some of the sort of operations managers, operations directors, even sort of managing directors and CEOs even of some of the places I've worked in, they started as a bartender. They didn't necessarily want a career in this 30 years ago, but they once you're in the industry, you work in with a really good team, and then the opportunity to get promotion to, like bar manager, for example. You step up into a bar manager, you're running a team. So you're managing people that you could be 20, 21, it doesn't matter how old you are, but you could be managing people older than you. So the skills you gain from that's fantastic. Then all of a sudden you could you want something new. So you can go to the front of house side of things and you could be a supervisor on the floor. And that you learn another set of skills, but you still know how to do your cocktails and your bar and you pouring a pint and things. And before you know it, you could be an assistant manager and a manager. It's all about those career paths and make sure that's all set up. But myself personally, I've worked with so many people over the years where they started in that restaurant 25 years ago and they're now the ops director. And in that they can really resonate with that. And it's such with my TA hat on, it's such an easy selling point. So, what can I do? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Well, I want Greg's job. I want Lisa's job. I want, this job. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, why do you want that? Well, I was there. They was here 10 years ago, literally where I am today. So if that's not inspiration of this is where you can be, then I don't really know what else you could do to sort of sell that.
Do you think the challenge is that, like what you describe, and it was the same for me when I started out in recruitment, you'd use those examples to kind of inspire people that traditionally didn't have the experience on paper so they could believe they could do it. But do you think for younger people, especially with the point that you raised about, okay, well, we have skill shortages, and I know we're looking at a UK lens, but
Mm,
actually it's the same everywhere. There's 100 million people hired in hospitality globally, but the attrition rates are really high, the attraction rates are really hard, skill shortages everywhere. But do you think hospitality, the employers need to do a better job of saying, okay, here are the skills you have, here are pathways within hospitality. It's not just barman, bar manager, like you have all these career pathways. Here's the earning potential, here are the
mm.
courses that you can take. Do you think more education needs to happen so people understand that this could be a career for life?
Joe, definitely. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and there's a lot of fantastic people out there that are doing that work. It needs more attention. It needs a little bit more support, I guess, from that side. But there are some companies that are really doing that and doing a fantastic job. They've been ahead of the curve. They've seen this for years and years, and they're winning awards. They're getting the recognition for it. But yeah, I think there is still a long way to go. But I think as soon as you tackle that, there'll be something else. There'll be another issue. Unfortunately, that is life a little bit. But as soon as you get that little tick on the box, say, right, we've sorted our career pathway, for example. Fantastic. And you see the numbers going up, your internal mobility is going through the roof, which is fantastic. But then you get to a point where you still need to go external to change the status quo a little bit. You don't want to be stuck in your own ways. The culture's fantastic, but you need to keep pushing if you want to be successful, because your restaurant, if you're in the middle of Leicester Square, for example, there's 10 other restaurants around you that will be able to take your staff if you're not keeping them engaged and keeping them focused and keeping them hungry for more. So yes, there's some great stuff happening, but I think you can never rest on where you are now. You've always got to strive to get that continuous improvement, really.
It's really interesting the point that you raise, because I know I often say a company's greatest asset are the people of the business. And then beyond that, it's their skills. And many
Mm.
companies don't know the full extent of the skills of the workforce. But I think what you're touching on is really important, because in hospitality, the talent play even a more important role. Like with a restaurant without people is nothing.
No, absolutely. And I think it's not just the people in that one restaurant, especially if you're a chain, for example. If you've gone to visit a site in Leicester, for argument's sake, and you've had a really great experience, that's your impression of every single restaurant within that chain now. It's not just that one restaurant in Leicester. Whereas if you went to someone in, Leicester Square, for argument's sake, and it was really busy because it's very tourist heavy there, the service may not be as personable as what it was, elsewhere, for example. As soon as you have one bad experience, it's kind of game over. A lot of people, because there is so much competition, if you went to a Pizza Express, for example, loved it, you'd probably go back to a Pizza Express elsewhere. But if you went to a Bella Italia, for argument's sake, where I used to work, if you had a bad experience there, you probably wouldn't go to a Bella again, because there's other Italians that you could go to and try something different.
So
So it's so important with that talent to make sure that they're delivering that service every single time.
Quick question. Do you actually know what skills exist across your organizations today? Or are decisions still being made on job titles, CVs, and assumptions around who can be reskilled and upskilled? You see, as AI reshapes work and organizations really face that pressure to cut costs, the real challenge isn't just skills gaps. It's understanding which skills are transferable and which can be redeployed into the future with a bit of upskilling. So for the listeners of Global Skills Podcast, Abodu, our sponsor, has created this free Skills AI readiness assessment. It gives leaders clarity in just 3 minutes. It shows skills gaps, automation exposure, and where future-ready capabilities already exist within your business. No data upload, no preparation, just clarity for the future of your organization. Visit abodu.com/global skills podcast. Now, back to the episode.
Okay, so I have a really interesting question, because I don't think anyone has positioned it this way before as to how important talent are for a business. And in
Mhm.
hospitality, it's clearly next level importance. So if that's the case, why in hospitality is attrition so high? Why have leadership not realized, okay, this is our number one problem we need to fix?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I think there's a number of reasons behind it. I think firstly, a lot of the leaders do recognize this, but they're almost powerless to do anything positive about it. I've worked with generally some phenomenal operators over the years, and they've been so inspirational. They've been brilliant leaders. I've had general managers that are absolutely, like, they're working 60, 70 hours because they love what they do. They're so passionate about it, but they've had to leave because they just can't physically do it anymore. And their leaders saying, I can't help you anymore. I don't have the budgets. I don't have the team. I can't, like, they're almost powerless, and it kills them inside. There's so many factors externally as well. It's not just budgets from your finance director, for example, or your CFO. It's external factors. The government may be changing some sort of legislation, for example. Like VAT goes up, goes down, extend the opening hours, for example. Everyone's like, oh, that's great, but it encourages people to go out more. But it doesn't necessarily help the guys in those bars and restaurants, because they're still stretched. And as a company, they're still paying more national insurance, they're paying more holiday rates, they're paying more sort of minimum wage as well. So all of a sudden, they're stretched. And now they've got to pay an extra 3-4 hours for opening as well with those staff. You can't just open the doors and have nobody there serving. So it's so super, super important. And I would say 99% of the leaders I've worked with, they do understand this, they do recognize it, but there's only so much you can do.
And how do they manage, like, if attrition is, gosh, I don't even know the industry standard. I mean, I know it's above 50, 60%. So just to put that into context for listeners, if like they haven't come across the term attrition, it essentially means if you employ 100 people in a year, it's estimated that 50, 60 of those will leave, and then you have to replace them. Now, great for recruitment agencies.
Yeah, absolutely. Internal TA teams, we're not a fan. We're not a fan of that.
That's a lot. That's a lot. And I guess that's the point that I'm trying to understand, because we have done sort of that exercise of, well, what's the skills gap cost for a business? And then when you factor in onboarding, training, loss of productivity while the headcount is open, like there's just so many recruitment costs, agents benefits, HR costs to get them in and do reference checks. Like it's so if 1 and 2, for example, and I know it's probably higher, leave. Why is this not like front and center? And why aren't governments saying, let's get apprenticeship programs? Because I believe this is one of the biggest contributing factors to income to a country.
Very much so. And I think, hospitality specifically, as you said, with the UK sort of lens on it, I think it's the third biggest revenue generator for the government, and we're the fourth or fifth largest employer, as an industry generally. And they, all these new office buildings that get open everywhere, they've all got these commercial spaces, retail space. But if you're not supporting the industry, no one's going to fill those spaces. Retail's been hit extremely hard over the years, so is hospitality. We're trying to attract the best people we can. And as I said, we've worked with some fantastic people. And there's some people that I've worked with that I would recommend them in any, within a heartbeat to 20 people straight away, because I know that they're phenomenal at what they do. They love their team, they love their people. But it's super, super difficult to keep fighting the same fight. After a while, if your company look after you and your direct line manager looks after you and really helps you out as much as they can, I would say 95% of the managers will run through a brick wall for them, and they will do these 50, 60, 70 hours because they get the respect there. Even if the company generally are not upping your wages, they're not giving you the bonuses, your targets are ridiculously high, but your team resonate with you. And I think that's the true leadership, and that's the power of the actual talent within the industry we work in. But I think if you're cutting things back more and more and more, we're pretty much on our knees at the moment. It's so difficult to get back up. It is hard, but if you work in the industry, you genuinely love it. I've worked in the industry for years. I've worked out for contracts and things, and I miss it. I miss the buzz. I miss the people that you work with because they're so passionate. You can have guests, diners, guests shouting and screaming at you because their steak is slightly cold or slightly too cooked for what they wanted. And the chef out there is, it's a 19-year-old guy or girl, and they've finished university, they're coming in to do their sort of 4 or 5 hour shift, or it's their day off from uni and they're coming in, they're trying their best. You've got people shouting at them and they just go, I'm so sorry, I'll get that sorted. The skills that it sets up, those soft skills for life, is absolutely priceless, but they shouldn't have to do that equally. So it's so hard to kind of find that true balance and work out what's going to be best. But it is an industry where people talk about so many negatives, but the skills you learn from that is, honestly, it really is priceless.
I remember I used to be part of a training and recruitment company that we gave people the chance that maybe typically they wouldn't get the chance. And we had a lot of bar personnel, and we would train them up, and then they would go into account management, commercial sales, and they would be phenomenal. They just needed the hard skills, but the soft skills, they were running circles around people. They were getting promoted first. It was one of the best times of my life hearing how they were performing because they were given the chance. And I think some leaders, if they're listening in today, they might be going, we need to look at hospitality. I hope we haven't made things worse.
No, 100%. I mean, there's a lady that I worked with years ago who came from restaurants, was in restaurants for about 10, 12 years or something, worked her way up. She started as a waitress part-time, went full-time, got promoted, etc., worked her way up to general manager. She left the company for a year to go and be a sort of regional manager. So she covers 3 or 4 sites. Loved it, but didn't like the company. So because she'd made really good connections with the company I was at, just messaged people. She came back, but she didn't want to be a general manager anymore. So she wanted to do recruitment. So she'd never done recruitment from a TA standpoint, but she'd done it in a restaurants for 10, 12 years. So she knows what she's doing. She's interviewed probably as many people as I have, if not more. She's worked in hospitality for years. So we know what the turnover and the attrition rate is like. And she was fantastic because her work rate was absolutely astronomical. And even me coming from an agency background as well, where it's all about numbers, you think, she's doing like twice as many calls as me. Like, how's she doing this? Because she knows what she wants. She knows exactly what works in those restaurants, and she's covering that area. So she already knows the talent pools. She knows what she's looking for. She knows what is going to make the perfect person straight away. And she can look beyond, oh, I've done a general manager job in a restaurant before. So again, it's the skill-based side of things. So all of a
Mm.
sudden, she just changed everyone's thinking. And it was brilliant to work with her because I kind of had the more TA side of things, more strategically. But she was there, she was delivering, and it was fantastic to work with her. And it just goes so she'd picked up all these skills from almost a completely different aspect of things. There was a couple of things that she'd related to and went, I'm going to go all out on that one particular set of duties or responsibilities.
It feels like it has to be fate or coincidence or chance that someone is realizing the path that they can take, rather than guidance. And I think that would be great because I know we're actually just doing a survey with young people at the moment in education, very young people. I should say students actually. And we're asking them questions about how do they feel about AI and, how do they feel about their future and do they know what career path? And I know when I was in college, it was, okay, do you want to be an accountant, consultant? None of those.
Yeah. It's those
Um,
professional career, wasn't it? That's, even when I was at school, sort of, what's it, 15, 16 years ago now. And that was very much, it wasn't as open as what it is now. So many
yeah.
new sort of industries, brand new job roles. Social media has taken off massively in 15, 20 years. The technology, the everything, the developer side of things as well.
And I think what's coming back more and more from the survey, it's just closing actually today, is they are looking for the guidance because there are too many choices. It's like getting a learning license where, what course should I take? I don't know. There's
Mm.
2,000 courses. I'm not sure. I need to know what's going to be good for me. And I just wonder the idea of like apprenticeship, skills matching, skills first hiring. Could that potentially fix some of the challenges that are there in hospitality? And what role, without getting too heavy on it, but what role do you think government could play in easing things for employers?
Yeah, I think, firstly, looking at the skills based side of things and the apprenticeship side, it can fix a lot of issues within hospitality, but it won't fix them all. And I think a lot of that it is an attitude side of things as well as an adaptability piece. People don't necessarily want to go and work in a restaurant, and it's hard to change that mentality until they're in there. But if you've got a good team, you've got a good kind of learning development behind you, I think it will improve. So an apprenticeship side of things, 1,000,000%, I think let's do some more work on it. Let's make it more attractive and let's shout about it a bit more. But from a government perspective, they need to help us with that as an industry. I think they need to give us more support, give us a little bit more scope. Everything seems to be, oh, we're increasing the price of that. And then all of a sudden the news media are saying, oh, pubs are increasing pints by 50, 60p and your food's going up like 10, 15%. But the government aren't saying why we have to do that. I'm not saying because the knock-on effects. I guess it is a bit of an education piece, I suppose. But I think you need people to just have a platform within hospitality specifically, have the platform to say how good it actually is. Because there's always two sides to every story. And, same as things on TripAdvisor or Glassdoor, for example, you don't necessarily see good things. You go online to have a moan and be negative about something. You don't always see the good side. So if you had a really good trip abroad, you wouldn't necessarily go, I'm going to talk about that. That hotel was brilliant. You just go, yeah, it was great fun. You tell your friends, absolutely. But word of mouth isn't always that important. So I think a little bit more support from the government in terms of shouting about the successes, shouting about how good it is, I think will hugely help. But I think from a financial aspect side of things, the support they need is just cut some of the VAT and cut some of the bills down a little bit. And I think that will give the whole industry, there's specific bits that are thriving still at the moment. The QSR side of things, the quick service is absolutely thriving. You've got delivery, you've got Uber Eats. Anyone that's online is tends to be doing a lot better at the moment because the overheads are quite low. You don't need as many staff because you're not doing table service. So it is a little bit easier for that department and that part of the industry. But generally, let's cut some of the taxes down a little bit, and all of a sudden we'll be thriving again because people want to go out because we can lower our prices.
Yeah.
Instead
Yeah,
of going out
absolutely.
for dinner and you used to pay sort of 40, £50 for a dinner or two, glass of wine, couple of beers or something, that was brilliant. Now you're looking at what, 60, 70, £80 minimum. So it's so difficult, and the food quality isn't necessarily improving that much as we want to, but we just can't afford it.
And so looking into the future of hospitality and recruitment and even the role that AI is playing, what sort of predictions do you have? Like, how do you think things will ease or get even harder in the coming years?
I think you're opening a can of worms there a little bit. I think things will generally, I think they will get easier over time. I think AI has a huge, huge part to play in things, but I think it needs to be used correctly. I think it's very much a buzzword at the moment, isn't it? Everyone, oh, we must use AI, must incorporate AI into it. but where? Where are we actually going to use AI efficiently and effectively to cut our time to hires and cut our costs down a little bit? I think you need to just analyze and evaluate your entire process, analyze what the weaknesses are and how we can improve it, and then kind of investigate from there. I think that's going to be not just hospitality, but I think everywhere across recruitment. I think that's the best way to kind of tackle that problem, because I think it's got so many positives about it. It can make things a little bit better. It can make things more streamlined, but a lot of it is the candidate journeys and the candidate experience. You can't just have AI saying in 24 hours, sorry, you're unsuitable. We can't always give feedback. The amount of applications you can sometimes get for a role is in the thousands at times. So it's a case of you can't necessarily review 1,500 CVs. So you have to have sort of knockout questions, and AI can help with that side of things. But again, AI can only be as good as what you program it to be. So there's a lot of work to do before you make it a fair and equal process for everybody that's going to be applying.
You raise a really good point, and I think that's going to come up more and more about ethical AI. And,
Definitely.
and I understand the pressure that recruitment is under, but I think when AI is ultimately making the decision of whether someone is in or out,
It's very difficult. It's a really fine line to tread. For me personally, I don't use AI in any of my sort of CV sifting from those stages at all. I've never incorporated it, and I'm not a big fan of it at the moment. I don't think anything can do it fairly enough yet. So I'm not even kind of exploring it. I keep an eye on things, of course, and speak to people in our networks. But yeah, I agree with you. The ethical side is just not right for me. I'd much rather close a job in a week or two rather than the 3 weeks, and then review the applications, then reopen it if we need to. I think that's the fair way to do it. So I personally will review every single CV. If as I said, we'll have knockout questions. So if you don't match the basic criteria, if you answered yes or no to those questions, then unfortunately not going to be the right fit, because that's what we need. A general manager, for example, if it's a really tricky restaurant or, a big restaurant, then we need someone realistically that's been a general manager before for a few years, rather than someone taking their first step into a GM role. They could be fantastic at it, but we need that safer option at times. So you need someone that's a little bit more experienced in that moment in time. I think that's fine. That's an ethical way of doing things, and you're explaining why you're doing that. That's not a problem. But if you've got an AI just say no straight away to something, and you have no feedback, it's so difficult then.
yeah, it has to be ethical. And I think the reality is the regulation that's coming is going to actually force that.
Yeah.
Think twice before you go down a certain path with AI. Okay. Ben, thank you so much. This has been a really, really good interview. And it's kind of, you shone a light for me anyway. I know we did a big focus on hospitality, but I feel there's just huge potential. There's levers to turn and twist. And if they were done, it could become one of the ultimate careers. And now more than ever, as AI takes over more and more hard skills, that interaction, human to human, how you make people feel, will be more valuable than anything. And thank you so much for coming on Global Skills Podcast.
No, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Whether you're leading a business, shaping education, planning your next career move, or just starting out, you're part of a global conversation about how we learn, work, and grow. If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss what's next. And for early access to new episodes, first invites to events, and a chance to connect with others driving real change, join the community at globalskillspodcast.com, because the future of skills belongs to all of us.